Democratic voters might be starting to look beyond President Biden for 2024. While the president's approval rating among Democrats is, according to Gallup, at 85%, there's a new New York Times and Siena College poll, and it shows more than half of Democratic voters would prefer a different candidate to run in 2024. For more on this, let us bring in Joel Payne and Jonathan Kott. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and, as you well know, a Democratic strategist. Jonathan, former communications director for West Virginia, Senator Joe Manchin, and also a Democratic strategist. So, Joel, let's start with you. New York Times Siena College poll, it's one poll, I grant you, but it found that 64% of Democratic voters said they do not want President Biden to run again in 2024. First of all, do you believe that? And second, is there anything Biden can do to reverse that?
I believe that 64% of people said that in a poll. I think there are a lot of reasons why they might have that. They don't all necessarily mean they aren't going to support Joe Biden if he's the Democratic nominee in 2024. I think if you could really look at it as a right direction, wrong direction for the country. This is a country that's going through a tough time right now. People are unhappy. And I've said for a long time, more than Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, the dirtiest word in politics is incumbent. And this is Joe Biden's mess now, as he's been the president for 18 months, and he's going to take the heat from the American people. I think what's positive for President Biden, unlike his predecessor, he does not bring polarization to the table, which means there's a route for him to get back to being politically viable in 6 months, in 12 months, and 18 months. There's a route back for President Biden, but there's no doubt right now he's probably at the low water mark.
Jonathan, that same poll, and again, it's just one poll, survey sample size below 1,000, so you can take that for what it's worth, but 94% of voters between the age of 18 and 29 rather, so 18 and 29, who participated in this survey said they don't want President Biden to run again. 94%. What does that tell you?
I think it tells you that, like Joel said, this is a snapshot poll taken right now. And I imagine a lot of these voters are younger, more liberal voters. And they were promised things not by Joe Biden, but by other people that would happen immediately if Democrats took control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's actually harder to govern than it is to campaign. And I think a lot of these voters are realizing that right now. I do think they can be upset. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden is going to run for re-election. Joe Biden's going to win. And I do believe these voters are going to come back and support him. I think what they should be doing is listening to Barack Obama, who says Democrats need to tell their story. There have been a lot of successes. Joe Biden has had some, hard things to deal with, but the Democrats have had successes. They need to do a better job of getting out there and telling those younger voters where they're getting their news from, what these successes are. And I think if he does that, he's got plenty of time to rebound for 2024.
Joel, as you well know, President Biden often says, don't judge me against the almighty, judge me against the alternative. And for the purposes of this conversation and the poll that we continue to talk about, the alternative is former President Trump. And despite all this terrible news in the poll for President Biden, he still beats former President Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, this is a little bit of what John and I are talking about here. The president's quote that he likes to use is euphemism there. He knows that he can always go to the American people, but more importantly to his political coalition on the Democratic side and say, I'm the guy that beat Donald Trump. And that is worth its weight in gold. And President Biden it has that Trump card, no pun intended, that he can always play in any scenario with the voters of his coalition. I think that the best thing that could happen for Joe Biden is for Donald Trump to be elevated as the Republican alternative. And I think my Republican friends know that. And that's why I think you're seeing polling on the other side of the aisle that says that a lot of Republicans don't want Donald Trump anywhere near that nomination. While he is clearly an influencer on the Republican side, he is not their best chance for winning. If you actually look at it, Donald Trump is the biggest loser in the Republican Party in a long time. And I mean that small L, loser. He lost the popular vote in 2016. He lost them control of Congress in 2018, and he lost the presidency in 2020 again. So I actually think that Joe Biden's best friend right now would be Donald Trump elevating himself as the Republican alternative right now.
Jonathan, you spoke forcefully a moment ago about Democrats needing to tell their story better. You know, because of your experience working with Senator Manchin, that there's just a few legislative days left in this midterm calendar year. Is there anything legislatively you think Democrats need to do, in addition to what they've already done, to turn around what appears to be kind of waning support for the president and his agenda among Democrats?
Yeah, I think right now they're working on getting a reconciliation package passed. They're still working on getting a China competitiveness bill passed. I think Mitch McConnell is trying to hold it up because he knows another bipartisan win for the president on an issue that Donald Trump only tweeted about and talked tough about, but didn't actually do anything about, would be bad for Republicans in the midterm. So I think getting those two things accomplished would be a lot. And then they have to just get out there and tell the story every day. They have to go out and stand in front of the people who are being helped by this. They have to stand in front of the chips factories that are being built in Ohio. Tim Ryan would benefit so much if we could get that bill done and he could stand there and say, yes, now we're bringing manufacturing back to Ohio. That would help Democratic voters, but it would also help Democratic incumbents and challengers up in 2022. And you then take that into the 2024 election.
Joel Payne and Jonathan Kott, we thank you very much.